and local control in a wise way. Thanks.
Thank you, Joelle. Awesome job. Thank you so much. That's really exact. That is the purpose of doing these trainings. I really do appreciate the thought that went into that. Thank you. Item number 2 is a conflict of interest. Do we have any conflict on the agenda tonight? Not seeing or hearing any. We're going to move over to public comment period. Item number 3 is reserved for anyone to present anything to City Council. Do we have anything to present this evening? Not seeing or hearing any. We're going to go to item number 4. Surprised that Youth City Council isn't here.
They may not have, because they were here at the last meeting.
Oh, you're right.
They may, it was the first of the month and I thought I better throw them on there just in case. So
You're right.
I think they reported last time and they'll report again in April.
They meet on the first Mondays. And since there was no first Monday yet, they haven't met yet this month.
That's great. Item number 4.2, presentation of the Stormwater Management Plan. The Stormwater Management Program and Plan. Brandon Jones. So before you begin, can I just advise the council to let him get through this before we ask questions? Save your questions till the end. Is that okay, Brandon?
That's fine. Whatever you want. If it's more convenient to answer them right at the time, I can. It's a fairly lengthy presentation, so
I think it would be
just
most
preparing
effective to get through it, and then because I'm sure you'll answer a lot of questions as you're going through it. So
Okay.
if you just want to go for it, and then we
Great.
can ask questions afterward.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to spend some time with me on this training. This is important for the City Council to hear because you are, whether you know it or not, you are a part of the stormwater program for Fruit Heights City. Some of you may know a fair amount of this. Some of you may know nothing. So this is an overall training of what the program is. Ted Perry is here. He is the one in the city that kind of runs the program with the assistance of Darren as well, and obviously Brandon. So Ted, if I say anything wrong, please raise your hand and correct me. Okay. So first off, what is the stormwater program? I'm not going to read, but just a few of these. Some of the definitions I think are worth actually reading. The stormwater management program, it often referred to as a SWIMP. I will also state now that there are a lot of acronyms in the stormwater program. And so I'll try to go through and tell you what they are. But then later I'll just refer to them as the acronym because that'll save time. It's a written plan that is used to describe the various control measures and activities the permittee will undertake to implement the stormwater management plan. Can you go to the next one? Hopefully.
Training adjourned? Oh.
Okay.
Brandon, he did put it in our Dropbox, so we have.
I think, yes, you may get bored. I'm just warning you now. This may be a little bit boring, but we've got to go the distance on this one. So.
And you know we have it in our Dropboxes too. So a lot of us have previewed it.
Okay. The presentation as
What
well?
you're doing, yes.
Okay, good. All right, so why is it required? This is an EPA requirement that was delegated to the state through the Utah Division of Water Quality. And so the people that enforce it on our level is the state, but it comes from the EPA. The reason that we're here tonight is that you annually, all those who are involved in the program need to have a training. So that's why we're doing this. Next.
It'll go. It just
Okay.
takes a second. There's a delay.
So you're gonna have to guess when I'm about done, and then yeah, go to the next one. If you want to just hurry me along, you can just when you think I've talked long enough, go for it. All right, so here's a graphic that shows what stormwater does and all of the potential areas where stormwater can become polluted. You've got construction sites, you've got people mowing their lawn, putting grass in the gutters that runs into the storm drain. Eventually it all ends up in streams or we don't have a lot of lakes right here, but all stormwater ends up in some kind of water body like that. Here, eventually it ends up in the Great Salt Lake, which you may think, well, what's the big deal? But I think in general, we want to make sure that our water bodies are clean. We don't want to purposely have polluted streams or anything like that. And so the purpose of this program is to make sure that we do what we can to avoid having water quality issues in those water bodies. Okay, so in the management plan, there are 6 minimum control measures, or MCMs. Those are used to prevent, it's the methods, the different methods that are required to prevent or to reduce the discharge of pollutants. So I'm going to be going through each of those, and in the management plan, it covers each one of those. So I'm going to just, Brandon.
Sorry. I think that's it. Just maximize that screen right there on the bottom right. Can you? Right there.
Okay, so let's talk about best management practices, or BMPs. A BMP is anything that is put in place to, it could be a physical thing, it could be a plan, it could be an ordinance, but it's any kind of measure or action to prevent or to reduce pollution. So that's just an overarching term for anything that we do to try to prevent that. And in our stormwater management plan, we identify a lot of different BMPs.
No. Did it switch?
Okay. All right. Let's talk about what an MS4 is. The acronym is Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. You, Fruit Heights City, are considered an MS4. This is not a program that you opt into. This is a mandate. And so you're required in your city or as an MS4 to meet the requirements of the permit, one of which is a stormwater management plan. Here's the long definition of the waters of the state, and any of those waters are what we're trying to protect. So simply put, oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. Just about any water conveyance is important, or impoundment, including groundwater. One more, there you go. There was some question about snowpack. I'm not going to go into that, whether or not that's considered waters of the state, but basically everything else that you can see on that graphic there. Okay, 6 minimum control measures. There they are. First one is public education and outreach. Second one, public involvement and participation. The third is illicit discharge detection and elimination. The fourth is construction, site, stormwater runoff control. Fifth is long-term stormwater management in new development and redevelopment, which is post-construction stormwater management. And then 6 is pollution prevention and good housekeeping of your own facilities. In the stormwater management plan, each of those MCMs has different tasks and goals and deadlines. We'll start with the first one, which is public education. Education and outreach. So the whole idea behind that is to encourage the public to be involved, for them to be aware that their actions could potentially lead to pollution in some sort, not knowing, because they're doing something that they don't realize is actually causing pollution. You know, for example, when you mow the lawn and you blow everything from the lawn out into the road, eventually, I mean, that eventually ends up in a storm, getting collected and goes into the storm drain, and then eventually ends up in our city, would end up in Bear Creek. You may think that's no big deal, but when everybody's doing it, it does tend to add up. So this first MCM is all about, let's educate people so that they know what not to do, so that the city's not constantly just having to be the one that's trying to clean everything up, right? So the city participates in the Davis County Stormwater Coalition. You may recall, maybe 4 months ago or so, maybe 5 months ago, came before you an agreement to participate in the Stormwater Coalition, Davis County Stormwater Coalition. And essentially what the coalition does is it tries to do everything that it can by pooling the resources of all of the different cities, including financially, to do some things that maybe each city on their own would be more difficult for them to do, like buying advertising time on a show, or billboards, or pencils, you know, or squeeze balls, or things like that. Anything that they do that it talks about, we all live downstream, and all of those efforts are typically done by coalitions. There's a coalition in Salt Lake. There's one up in Box Elder, and we are part of the Davis County Coalition. So we try to meet our public, at least a portion of our public education, by participating in the coalition. One more. Here's a couple of examples. You've seen the curb markers. It talks about please don't dump or discharge things in there. It drains to the river. All of those efforts to try to teach people. They'll go to the schools. I think they go to the 5th graders, 4th graders. It used to be 4th graders and now it's 5th graders. But they come and make presentations to them about all of this education. That's the best way to just prevent things, by having people know what not to do. Here's some examples. Things that Fruit Heights has done. One thing that is done really well, I feel like, is the city's website. There's a full page on stormwater. There you've got Ted looking good in his picture right there on that page. Because he's the guy that ultimately is the one that's trying to make sure that all of this is implemented. Now let me just take one quick step back and just say, hopefully by the time we're done with this, you'll get a good feel for what's involved and what should be happening. And Ted does his level best to do everything that he can with the time, manpower, and resources that he has. There's more to do than can be done, in my opinion, by Ted alone. And so I would encourage the city, as you're looking into your budgets and things ongoing, that we really are putting enough resources to this program so that we can be as compliant as we can be. Okay. On that website, you don't have to go back. On that website, it talks about it gives you all the resources. If you want to educate yourself about the program, you can go through and read the same stuff that I'm talking with you tonight. There's a hotline for calling about illicit discharges and things like that, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Things that the city also does is Ted, I believe, is a registered stormwater inspector. He goes to the classes to be trained for that, and so that's important. We've got to develop and maintain some standard operating procedures. We'll talk a little bit more about what those are. SOPs, another acronym. Training for employees annually, as well as city councils. And then a huge effort, or a huge part of this program, is the documentation of what you're doing. That is super overwhelming and can be, but the state will come and do what they call an audit, a stormwater audit. A lot of cities have gone through this so far. So far, Fruit Heights has not. But they will come in and they'll say, here's the things that you should be doing. And they look to see how well we're performing. And then they will give us an assessment. It's possible that you can be penalized. Some have been, some aren't. It depends, I guess, on how well they feel like you're trying. But at a minimum, they're going to identify all the things where you're deficient and then give you a timeline to become compliant with that. So it is better, whether you like this program or not, it's better to be proactive and do what you need to do. Okay, I'm moving on. MCM number 2, public involvement and participation. So the first was education, and now this is public involvement, right? A little bit different. I'm not going to read through all of that, but the city should be inviting the public to be involved. You'll notice on the agenda that after I'm done, and this is on purpose, we've got a bunch of public here. I'm being a little sarcastic, but the opportunity for the public to be able to hear what the city is trying to do and give their input as to what they think should be done, if there's anything different than what we're trying to do, is part of minimum control measure number 2. All right. Yeah, that's fine. You can again, keep documentation. You'll notice that that's everywhere. Again, that's because when the state comes, they're going to expect that we can pull out and say, well, for example, when did you invite public, input? And we'll say, well, on March 1st, we had a public hearing. We advertised for a public hearing. We presented and trained on the program and invited the public to give whatever input or feedback they have. And we can document that, through our meeting minutes and so forth. Okay. Illicit discharge. The picture kind of explains it. We are supposed to do everything we can to avoid illicit discharges. So the example I gave earlier about the grass clippings in the road could be considered an illicit discharge. There's ones that are super obvious, and then there's others that might not be so much. Again, a lot of that goes back to education, but there's a hotline that you can call if you see, like if you really did see someone pouring a can of paint down the storm drain, that would be something you should definitely call and try to take care of that. That definitely is going to could have a major impact, right? All right, keep going. So it's hard to see in the picture a little bit, but you can see there's oil on top of that water. Here's the official definition. I'm going to read it. Any discharge to a municipal separate storm sewer an MS4, that is not composed entirely of stormwater, except discharges pursuant to a UPDES permit other than the UPDES permit for discharges from the municipal separate storm sewer, and discharges resulting from emergency firefighting activities. So we're supposed to enforce that, or try to avoid doing things like that. The definition is a little convoluted, I think, but it's basically anything that could put pollution into our storm drain system is an illicit discharge that we should avoid. Okay, here's the list in that same section that talks about illicit discharges. These are considered non-stormwater discharges. I'm not going to read through those, but you can kind of glance through. Okay, so tasks. Again, the general idea is that we're going to avoid illicit discharges. So that means sometimes you've got to locate problems. If you see things showing up, but you don't know where they're coming from, you've got to find out what's going on. Again, you document your actions. You're going to hear me say that a lot. We inspect our outfalls, and an outfall is basically where maybe we have a pipe that discharges directly into Hates Creek or Bear Creek. Those are the outfalls, and so that would be a good place to look to see if there's, in a storm event, if it appears that there's any pollution that's showing up there, then that means we've got a problem somewhere, and you got to go back and try to find where that might be coming from. So that's the purpose of the inspections. Here's a couple of obvious illicit discharges, like I was saying. When you see that, does that make you feel like, oh, you shouldn't do that? I hope it does, because that just seems like really blatantly obvious that you shouldn't be pouring your paint down the storm drain, or your oil. Okay, here's some others that might not be so obvious. A leaking dumpster. Grass clippings are a big one. They sometimes just get dumped anywhere. Discharging contaminated water. Sometimes it may not be so obvious if you're just trying to de-water something where you've just got some dirty water and you're just simply kind of pumping it out. But you have to try to think through, well, where is this going? It may not be so bad to pump it out as long as you're putting it in a place where maybe some of those sediments in the water can settle out, and then the clean water moves on. If it's just going straight into the storm drain, then that makes it very difficult, right, to treat it or to take care of it. Here's just some more examples. Those things do happen sometimes, where somebody will tap into a pipe and have something that they pump directly into the storm drain. Very difficult for us to know that they've done that. It's not very common, but it could happen. One that maybe you don't think about too much is just if you're emptying your chlorinated swimming pool. It has chlorine in it, and eventually that ends up in the streams. It could cause some issues. Okay.
Don't
Don't even think about it. Okay, keep going. If you see something, say something. Again, this works better if people are educated and they try to help each other out. I don't like to think of it in a policing manner necessarily, but just trying to help people understand if someone doesn't know that there's an issue. If there's a way for a neighbor to handle it in a nice way, then maybe that helps, versus the city coming and having to say something. Okay, MCM number 4, construction sites. This is one that's been, I think we're actually doing really, really well on. Every time that you're doing some type of construction where you're disturbing over an acre, then you need to have a permit for that, and you need to implement all of the best management practices, or BMPs, to help prevent, mainly for construction sites, as sediment leaving the site. So I think a lot of you are probably familiar. You've seen different construction sites where you've got the kind of that black fabric fence up. It's called the silt fence, and the idea is that if in a storm water or a storm event, if you've got some of those silts running off the site, they hit that fence, and the fine stuff stays behind and the water moves on. So you keep those silts from entering the storm water system. We do have mats here tonight, and they're currently working on doing some grading up on the hillside that you're all aware of. They have implemented their stormwater pollution prevention plan that incorporates all of these things, street sweeping, that type of thing. All is part of the construction portion of the plan, which is MCM number 4. I will just add that the inspections are part of that. The permittee should be inspecting their own sites. The success is making sure that those BMPs get maintained. You can just install them in the beginning, and the silt fence gets torn out or pushed over, and then it's not very successful, right? So during the whole course of construction, you should be maintaining those. They have a stabilized construction entrance, typically just a lot of rock, angular type rock, so that as trucks that have a lot of mud and stuff on their tires as they drive in and out, that's supposed to come off so they don't track very much on the street. Again, the idea, if you have mud on the street and then it rains, then the mud ends up in the storm drain. And so trying to make sure that you keep as much of that on the site, not leaving the site, is the goal. And so you implement all those different types of BMPs to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to stay and doesn't get into the storm drain system. So there's a host of tasks that are associated with this. Again, I'm not going to read through those, but you can see that, again, there's a lot to do. And for one person to try to accomplish all of this is very difficult. Our involvement from city engineer perspective is that we will review the plans. We try to give assistance to Ted as much as we can. In the end, it's just a lot of work to do. Ted is very well educated about what the responsibilities are, but he just does his best to do what he can do with the resources he has. Here's an example. You may have seen the acronym SWIP before on maybe construction sites when you've driven by. Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan is what that stands for. And it's part of the permit. When a contractor is going to do a construction project, they turn in a notice of intent or an NOI to the state. So the state has documented all across the whole state. You can look it up. They have a website that has all of the NOIs that have been submitted for where all the construction activity is. If, let's say, you were doing a construction project and you did not have an NOI or a SWIP in place, and someone from the state was to come, you could potentially get in big trouble. The city would kind of get looped into that because the city is the MS4 who's supposed to make sure that everybody working in their city has an NOI and an appropriate SWIP. But the actual BMPs that are employed on that construction site are somewhat up to the permittee or the contractor as to what they think is going to be the best means for preventing any pollution. So there are forms that are filled out for all of this, again, so that we've got documentation for all of that. And there's potential enforcement. We have, there's ordinances that you have a current ordinance. It I believe has some, I don't remember the exact amount of enforcement that is in there. Ted, do you remember what you can do by the ordinance? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, it models the permit, which says that you need to show escalating forms of enforcement. So in other words, if there's a contractor that's having trouble with whatever it is, BMP or cleanup or whatnot, you go through the steps of escalating enforcement. You talk to them, you send them a letter, send them another letter, and you could shut the job down if need be, and fine them if need be, get them to come.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'll just quickly repeat that just in case anybody couldn't hear. Escalation of enforcement is the key. So if someone was doing something that we felt was not compliant, then you would give them a letter. If they didn't conform, you'd give them another letter, and you could potentially shut the project down, including going up to fines. Okay.
Oh, sorry, we're still there.
So MCM number 5, moving on. These are long-term stormwater management BMPs. So we just talked about construction, and that's just the stage where they're building something. But once the goal with construction site is that you're supposed to do the work and then get it stabilized. So once you've graded a hillside or something like that, then you would plant some seed or put some erosion blankets on it or something like that that helps it to be, quote unquote, stabilized. But there are long-term stormwater BMPs that you can put in place that are there for when construction is over and we're still trying to make sure that the stormwater remains clean. And I'm not going to read through those. One of the more recent, go back to the LID.
Is it that one?
So low impact development is something that you may or may not have heard of. It's been in the permit for some time, but just recently, in the last revision of the permit with the state that we have to comply with, became required. So it was recommended before, and it is now required. Low impact development is kind of incorporates 2 different elements. One is a retention requirement, and the other is water quality. And so what you're supposed to be able to demonstrate is that you're trying to, as much as possible, when it rains, keep the stormwater as close to the original conditions as possible. And so trying to get that first portion of the storm to just infiltrate into the ground rather than everything running off. That's kind of the overarching goal. So as a part of that, the second element is just water quality. So as you develop a site, you change the characteristics of the ground. It used to be a field, and after you develop it, it's now homes and a road and a lot of hard surfacing. And so what you're trying to do is put in place some measures so that as much as possible, that stormwater, at least the first portion of the storm, doesn't leave the site. It stays there, goes into the ground, similar to what would have happened before it was developed. And then after that, you've got to have in place all of your flood control measures, like your detention basins and things like that. So there's a way to calculate that, how much water you're supposed to retain. It's the 80th percentile storm. That calculates, there's a calculation that you go through to figure out what the total volume, how much water you're supposed to keep on site. And that amount of water is also the amount of water you're supposed to implement some type of water quality element. There are like physical structures that you can put, like a hydrodynamic separator is an example, where you've got stormwater that comes into what looks like a manhole, but it's built in such a way that it encourages the water to circulate around it gives the center portion of the water, slows the volumes down so that the sediment falls out, and anything that's floating gets caught also in the center. You can imagine that if you've got something like that in your city, it's permanent, right? So it requires maintenance. It's constantly going to be full of water because that's the way that it works. And then as the storm comes through, that whatever it brings with it settles out or floats, and then the city needs to, on a regular basis, come and clean that out. Obviously, it won't work very well if it gets so full of sediment. Then it'll just continue to wash that back down the storm drain. So that's just one example of a permanent BMP. So as you know, new development comes in, and in Fruit Heights, there's not too much left. Matt is embarking on the bench area up there, Rockloft Ridge Estates, and so all of these requirements he'll need to comply with. We've already discussed that. He's working on identifying what they'll be doing on that development as far as these LID measures go. But the city's responsible to make sure that some of that is in place. Now, some of those might be privately owned, and some might be publicly owned. If you
Go back. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Actually, keep going, and I'll finish my thought. I'll come back to it. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Go one more. It'll show you. There you go. Okay. So Fruit Heights has one of the requirements of the permit is that you allow for a selection of 5 different LID BMPs. This is, you can't really read it very well because it's small, but this is a table that we have adopted, Fruit Heights has adopted, identifying the BMPs that we will allow. So bioretention cell, a bioswale, vegetated strip, an infiltration basin, a dry well, and an underground infiltration gallery. All of those terms probably don't mean much to you. I'm going to try to give you some examples of what those look like. But when a developer comes in, or if the city has a project, right, we have to play by the same rules. So if the city has a project that would require some of these, then the different types of BMPs would be what we would be required to implement. But they're long-term, so they require maintenance, and that's why the city gets to kind of give some direction as to which ones they will accept, because there's a maintenance element to every single one of these, and limited time and resources can make it difficult to be maintaining all of these. All right, so here's an example of a vegetated strip that goes to a bioswale. The idea is as the stormwater runs off the parking lot, rather than having curb there that would pick it up and take it right into the storm drain, you put some vegetation that allows it to slow down a little bit, infiltrate a little bit. Just going through those types of things provides some water quality or cleaning. And then you can have some different types of soil media that act like a filter. And so then as it goes through there, you can either just have it go into the ground, or sometimes you can put a pipe underneath there if you've got other issues going on where you need to collect the water. And the idea is, as it goes through there, it cleans up the water, and what gets discharged is cleaner. Okay. This, you may have seen this, this bioretention cell that is along Grant Avenue in Ogden. It's right by the temple on the west side. So it's right in the middle of the road. Well, it's on off to the side, but they have a nice bike path on the other side. And you can see the curb cut. So the idea is that the stormwater drains, goes through that curb cut, and then into that bioretention cell and provides some stormwater cleaning. This is an infiltration basin. So it's very much like a detention basin, except that the bottom portion is retained. And when I say retained, what I mean is there's a difference between retention and detention. Retention means the water doesn't go, it doesn't leave the site. Detention means it temporarily stays there. Detention is more of a flood control measure. Retention is more of a water quality measure. So an infiltration basin would bring water into what looks like a detention basin, but the bottom portion would not leave. Now, we have this in our city. The new 89 project, or the 89 project, has built some new detention basins, one of which, right by 400 North on the south side. I'm sure all of you have driven by that multiple times, and you see that it's just got water in the bottom. Part of that is because they don't have all the downstream piping connected. And so it eventually will get, once they have that done, then it will eventually go away. But the bottom portion of that basin is intended to retain water. So when, and it's simply just by the way they construct it, the bottom of the basin is lower than the outlet pipe. So as the water comes in, it just fills up to that point, and then when it gets to the outlet pipe, then it can start to leave the site. But that bottom portion will never go anywhere except into the ground. Or, when it's really hot, some of it will evaporate, but most is just going to go into the ground. So all of the detention basins, with the exception of, I believe, the golf course, have a retention element to them. Now, there is a provision in the permit that allows for if something is technically infeasible. So let's say you've got super shallow groundwater. Well, you can't infiltrate if you just got standing groundwater, you're not infiltrating anything. And so in those cases, you may not be able to do the retention requirement, but you can still provide a water quality element. Pick some type of BMP that still provides a water quality, but it may not provide the retention. So you are supposed to provide both, unless there's some circumstance where it would be technically infeasible. Another example, because this will come up in the future, would be Matt's development, Rockloft Ridge Estates. Due to the sensitivity of the hillside with water, we really don't want to have retention. There's some concern that if you have retention that is infiltrating into the ground, where exactly that would go and the problems that could cause. So in my opinion, that would be something that would be technically infeasible, because it could potentially cause other problems. So they will be implementing other things for water quality, but not as much the actual retention. Now, there's always still the flood control element of this. So there still needs to be detention basins, but those aren't as problematic because the water is only there temporarily. It's only there during the storm. It fills up so that the downstream piping doesn't get overwhelmed, and then it empties. And that should empty on a fairly quick basis versus retention. Could take up to 24 to 48 hours. So they're very different. Anyway, okay, sorry. You just kept going through. Did I skip anything?
No.
Okay.
Just went to the next one.
Okay, good. So here's a dry well, and it's very similar to what it sounds like, and that is that it's kind of a hole in the ground, perforated around the edges, and as it fills up, it can infiltrate to the ground surrounding it. When you're doing something like that, though, you do need to have what's called pretreatment. That's the water quality element that I'm talking about, so that you can try like a hydrodynamic separator. You want to get that sediment and stuff out and the oils out before it goes into the ground, not just because it would potentially contaminate groundwater, but it may also cause your dry well to completely plug up, right? So then it won't work very well. So that's an example of a dry well. Underground infiltration galleries, you've maybe, I'm going to assume that maybe you've seen some of these being built before. I've got a detention basin kind of up by my office where it used to just be a hole in the ground, and they came in and put these chambers in, basically just voids in the ground where the stormwater goes in, and it will infiltrate into the ground, but you fill it, right? So on the surface, you don't see anything. Underneath all of that, though, it's infiltrating. Before the 89 project, we actually had one of these on the detention basin that was up by 400 North, just at the north end of Mountain Road. And
Got one right here.
oh, yes, we do. And we do on the
The
Heights. Yes, thank you. Just to the east of us here, the north of us. Yes, so the same principle. You don't see it, but it's allowing the water to infiltrate. These can be done both as detention basins and retention basins, or a combination of both, depending on where you set your outlet pipe, if that makes sense. So you can, if you set it right at the bottom, then it could function just as detention and completely fill, but completely empty. If you put that outlet pipe elevation higher than the floor, then some of it will stay and never leave and just infiltrate. Okay, more tasks. So you need to develop SOPs for all of this and implement those. Part of what we have in our current stormwater management plan that's before you tonight is goals for getting some of these tasks done. So it doesn't mean that all of these are done. It just means that we're going to work on putting in standard operating procedures for the various things that we're talking about. So more tasks. You've got to inventory them. You've got to have on file an inventory of where all your long-term BMPs are, what they are, and your standard operating procedures would talk about, well, and how are we going to maintain those? How often are we going to maintain those? How often should we inspect them? Hopefully you're getting a feel for how much time and effort this takes really to be successful at doing it. Okay, last one. You guys making it okay? Okay. All right, MCM number 6, good housekeeping. We are so permittee owned or operated facilities. You can see some examples underneath there, the public works shop, city hall, parks, any city owned detention basins or retention basins. We are responsible for having BMPs in place for those to make sure that we ourselves are not pollutants. Okay. Again, we need to maintain an inventory of all the things that we own The inventory I was talking about before is just inventory of everything, even if they're privately owned. But the inventory for our own selves is what requires the standard operating procedures. So some more tasks would be to develop a SWIP for all of our high priority committee owned and operated facilities. We're supposed to be performing weekly inspections, quarterly inspections, developing and constantly updating our standard operating procedures. If anything that we're doing in there feels like it's not working, then we need to be revising those, changing those. So it's supposed to be a dynamic document, not just a set and forget type thing. More training, more documentation. Okay, so just in summary, a SWIP is a comprehensive plan that covers all facets of the city's stormwater program. It requires involvement from the city council to public works to the public. Implementation requires time, manpower, both initial and ongoing. So there you go. That is your stormwater management plan in a wrap.
Thank you.
What questions do you have? Okay.
My question is, as it seems like as we become more and more dense as a community, and that's dense as in covered area, not dense up here.
Okay. Okay. That's good that you clarified that.
That stormwater issues will become worse? Is that true?
Potentially, but I think we have we have in place and we have goals in place that are going to are much more than maybe we were required to do in the past. And so even when if you were to redevelop something, you still become required to be in compliant with our stormwater management plan. So as long as you're developing over an acre, then you've got to comply with both construction and ongoing permanent BMPs. The permanent BMPs is not something that, like I said before, were recommended, and some were required in some places, but that wasn't as much of a requirement as it is now. So there's no question now that we need to have permanent BMPs in place that take care of water quality, and everybody that moves forward from this point on has to comply with all of this. So I feel like there's more in place now than maybe there was. And so as we continue forward, it's likely to stay as good or better than we were. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Nice job. Thank you.
Any other questions?
At 400 North, why do they design it purposely to retain water?
Just to meet the requirements. So UDOT has to meet the same requirements. It's the state is required to meet. So the 80th percentile storm, they've got to retain that. They've got to provide water quality measures. So they're doing an infiltration basin in those detention basins. That's what that is.
Seems like a good place to have mosquitoes hatch.
Yeah, there's definitely, with all of the regulatory things that we have to comply with, there's a lot that conflict with each other.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling you what, to the best of my ability, what the program is. Are there things in there that don't make sense? In my opinion, yes. Do we get to choose whether or not we do it? Not really. I mean, I guess until we get audited, we could put our heads in the sand, but I've seen the results of that, and I think it's best for the city to do their best to try to comply.
So we're retaining water here. That's
Yes.
very unfortunate.
Well, it's not, it has an outlet. Water will flow in and out right here.
Right. You're talking about the city property right
Yeah,
here.
the city property.
There's a small in the southern end that will be retained. But the whole idea is that it should be gone within 24 hours.
Yeah. So Lake Fiesta down at Davis High.
So that makes sense, but retaining it 400 north just doesn't make sense. Why are we retaining that water?
Yeah, where's the outlet pipe? How high up is it?
You can't see it it's kind of buried with the water.
Yeah, it's underwater.
Yeah.
So, until they finish the Bear Creek and get all the pipe down in the bottom there, it'll stay that way because they've got it capped off up there. So it will drop as far as the depth of water, but it should dry out, but in the mixed garden, it's gonna hold that water a lot longer than just a.
So in other words, a big portion of the time it's going to be dry
Yes.
unless we've had
Unless we have
a lot of water, and then you're going to see it for a couple weeks and then it'll dry up under normal circumstances.
Yeah. After each
That makes
event,
more-
it should
that makes more sense to me.
it
Just
should
seeing
go
it all
away
the
within
time
24
there, I'm
hours.
like,
I mean,
All of them should?
yes, because when you design it, you need to get the infiltration rate of the soil underneath it, and if it can't infiltrate quickly enough to be gone in 24 hours, then it doesn't work. So you have to come up with something else.
Great. Awesome.
So there's no need to have mosquito abatement on call.
Well, it doesn't mean that they're not going to have long-term issues. Again, there's some parts of this that yes, I mean my career in doing flood control, I've typically tried to design things so that they could be multi-use, so that you really only had water in there when you really needed it in a major event, and the rest of the time it would stay dry. That is basically in conflict with what the program is trying to accomplish now, and so we've had to make adjustments, whether we like it or not.
Okay.
And the result is we could get stiff fines if we don't comply by the EPA.
Yeah, the worst case scenario, yes, you could.
So the reality is it's not just contractors, it's city, it's
No, that's why
residents, it's the city as a whole.
Right. And since you kind of are the policymakers and hold the purse strings of the city, that's why we're doing this presentation, so that you can have a better feel for when there's a need for budget to do some of this stuff, you understand why.
Yeah, because we could be fined when we're out. If we get out of compliance, we can be fined per week until we get in compliance.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've seen them thus far, do really heavy escalation that way. It's more, if you're audited, they're going to come in, they're looking a comprehensive review of what you're doing. They're going to identify where they feel you're deficient, and they'll tell you what they feel like you need to do to become compliant. Some of those things may actually be physical infrastructure things that they think you need to do. Anyway, so
yeah, I guess I'm looking more at water treatment plants, but
right. I mean, if there's a construction site, let's say a city construction site where we are, there's some illicit discharge stuff going on, the state could come and shut us down and fine us, and they would continue to add fines, per day while we're out of compliance, especially if you are obstinate about it, right? But my general feel is if we're doing we do our very best, right? We're just going to do our very best to be as compliant as we can. And I don't know that we can do much more than that, but education's a big part. So that's why we're here tonight.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Brandon. Let's move on.
Ted's done very good at keeping records and all that kind of stuff. So if we do get audited, we do have a lot of the records that they're going to be asking for and stuff like that. And we have them, and we can be able to go right through it with them. So
Great.
He's done a really good job at making sure.
Names are drawn now.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that. Let's move on to item number 6 or 5, which is a public hearing. So we need to open a public hearing. I don't need to do that by motion, do I, Eileen?
We move into a public hearing.
I have a motion from Diane and a second from Eileen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. This time we have a public hearing. Anyone can come forward.
To talk about the plan that was just presented.
Talk about the plan, the stormwater plan. Not seeing or hearing any, I would welcome a
Move out
motion.
of public hearing.
Motion from Eileen,
I'll second it.
second from Diane. All in favor of moving out of public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That was unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move over to item number 6.1. Review, discuss, approve, deny the stormwater management plan. I think it was very well presented. Ted, I don't think we can say enough. I know how much work you put into your job, but I appreciate the presentation tonight. We've all had a chance to review it, and I would look for a motion for the stormwater management plan.
I have a question. I guess I should have asked sooner.
Nope, you're
At the
fine.
very, very end it just looks like one place that was maybe funny. See, I didn't look ahead at the presentation you just gave. I didn't see that in time, but I did see the PDF of the whole thing, and I reviewed that. At the very bottom, there's one thing that looks funny to me, and that's on page 16 under record keeping. It doesn't look like that's what it's meant to say, because that looks like it's what it was meant to say, which it does on the previous section. But since we're talking about the city complying, it says Fruit Heights City will maintain program records, including documentation of each site visit, inspection records, denial of entry occurrences, warning letters, notices of violation. I mean, that, and other enforcement records that demonstrate an effort to bring sites into compliance. Is that really on your own, to yourself? Okay, because that sounded a little funny to me, but if that's the
does.
way it's supposed to be, then
It does sound a little funny because we are the enforcing agency, but we need to enforce upon ourselves the same requirements. So you would document it in a similar manner, but it's to yourselves.
okay, thank you.
I move that do you want a motion, Mayor?
I love it.
I move that we approve the stormwater management plan that has been presented to us and described to us.
Excellent. So I have a motion on the table from Diane. Do I have a second?
I second that.
I have a second from George.
Mayor, can I just
Yes.
ask? So there's a resolution that adopts this.
Oh, you are right. It is a resolution. So we need to approve this via resolution. Brandon, that's going to be you.
And it's on our screen right now. So
That's what I say, is that I move that we approve the resolution.
Resolution.
The resolution
Please, no revolution, just a resolution.
2201.
2201.
it's the very first one for year 2022. So
Resolution of the Fruit Heights City Council, that we adopt the stormwater management plan.
So I have a motion from Diane to adopt resolution 2201. I have a second from George. Any further discussion? Any further questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
I'm struggling because while we're familiar with stormwater and we've had presentations in the past, this is something that was not available to our community until just today. And so to say we've had a public meeting, okay, we advertised we were having a public meeting. They could have come and listened to the presentation, but I'm uncomfortable voting on something that was not in our folder within the appropriate amount of time. So,
And if you want to wait and do it at the next meeting, you certainly could.
just as a matter of transparency to our community.
So I would agree with that in principle, but it's a stormwater management plan. It's not, It's not like a budget hearing, if that makes sense.
And I was under the assumption that this was put forth prior years as well, too. This is just an update to
That's
something
correct.
that is.
Yes, that's correct.
So the public has seen this before.
It's been on the website for
Right.
2016.
Right.
As a newbie here, I know that it was a big stretch. I mean, I had to spend a couple of hours looking at this to try to make any sense of it. In the future, if we could have those things a day or two sooner, that would be helpful. Because it says that it was turned in last fall, and so maybe I just didn't know where to look for it.
Yeah, so maybe I can explain that a little bit more. So it was due back in November of last year, but the state wanted to see that it had come before the city council, and in our opinion, that it was adopted by the city council. And so that's the purpose of tonight's meeting. But yes, and again, the management plan is not a set document that just stays like it is, right? It's a dynamic document. And so it can change at any moment in time. We can, if there's any things that we want to change, we just change them. But going through the process of presenting to you and discussing it to make sure that you know what's in there was the idea tonight, so that, and then having a resolution is, we felt, was the best way to show you are on board, you understand what is there, and you support trying to be compliant.
And the resolution recommends and requires us to do 2 public hearings about this plan every year, from what I saw.
That's in the plan. That's in the stormwater management plan. So even if it wasn't in the resolution, it's still in there.
Right. Okay.
And is there any time frame for that? Can we have the next public hearing at the next meeting?
No, it's 6 months apart from what I
Yeah,
saw.
mean, I
that
think
Ted
the
put
Yeah.
idea is to just have, moments in time when you're give the community time to give feedback if they want to. So this was checking the first box for this year, was basically the idea. And it was noticed as a public hearing. So that part, it was noticed.
Right. So I do have a motion on the table to adopt Resolution 2201. I'm going to proceed forward with that unless we have other further questions. Because it is a resolution, it is handled via roll call. Brandon, do you want to handle the roll call?
Yes, I can. Councilmember Diane Anderson,
4.
Councilmember Gary Anderson,
4.
Councilmember Florence Sadler,
4.
Councilmember George Ray,
4.
Councilmember Eileen Moss,
4.
Mayor John Pullman.
I don't get a
You don't
vote.
get to vote, but you're on here, so.
But you
Okay.
get a sign.
I get a sign. I don't get a vote. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 6.2. And we appreciate the attendance tonight. That was not quick.
Can I just say for the record, I agree with Councilmember Eileen Moss that we probably needed more time to put this out for the public hearing. And so we should do that for the next event to make sure that it's well presented, not only for the council, but for residents who could participate, because I know I only saw it this afternoon as well.
I'll agree, but I also will defend Ted that it's on the website and everything on here is very public.
It's
Not
not.
to be critical,
Yeah,
but
it's
just,
it's not a criticism.
no, I'm
it's not
not
a
trying to
criticism.
Well,
criticize.
if anything, I'll say the stripes go to me because I didn't provide it to Brandon until today. So
Yeah, it's more, we've been asked to be prepared when we come here. And, when I get this in my inbox at 2:30, I'm at work. And so when I come home, usually I like to have just something quick to eat. So how much time does that really leave me to review this?
Good point.
So
it
to
doesn't. So
prepare-
I apologize.
That's the
and,
thing.
Next time we have a public hearing, if there's any documents to be provided.
Yeah, and it's not an attack
No,
on
I know,
anybody.
but
It's just-
I can appreciate where you're at, and I don't disagree at all. So yes, that's my apology.
So item number 6.2,
Thank
review,
you.
discuss, approve, deny the annexation of 12.623 acres into the corporate boundaries of Fruit Heights City.
So I was hoping that Jeff would be here tonight, but he actually has COVID, so
Oh
he
my
is not
goodness.
here.
Is he going to be at tomorrow's meeting? Oh my goodness sakes.
I don't know. I didn't talk to him
Video,
about
can you
tomorrow's
video?
meeting. As far as I know, he will be, but I don't know. So I'm going to tell you what we have been doing. We sent out 30 days ago this notice of annexation to the parties that it needed to go out to, which would include the Raymonds, Hates Creek, Rocky Mountain Power, Questar Gas, Fruit Heights City, Davis County, and the Forest Service sent this notice out, and they had a period of time to respond back about any concerns. We received, I talked to Jeff today, Davis County did not receive anything. We have received nothing as it relates to the annexation. I have spoken to several people asking what was being annexed, and explained to people that it was some property on the East Bench that was coming into the city. It currently sits as unincorporated, so we are just simply pulling that into the boundaries of Fruit Heights City, and we have followed the requirements for the annexation. Now that that portion is complete, we will be doing another resolution to bring it in officially, an ordinance to bring it in officially into the city boundaries that will then be recorded at the county. So this was just a step in that process.
So Brandon, why do we need this step? Because if we just have an ordinance, we would vote for or against that, just like we did on the last thing. I'm not sure what purpose this step is.
I'm just following the procedures that I've been told to follow. So I can't answer why, only that we have to do it. I don't know. It's changed. The procedures for annexation have changed. And not having done one before, this is the step that this is what I'm following, as I'm told to do.
And again, something that was not in our folder until,
This was not something that we have seen this several times.
but not in our folders.
The annexation has been discussed several times.
I understand that,
Okay.
but not in our folder. Available for the public to look at as part of our documents for the evening.
Okay. I'm not asking you to do anything at this time.
So this has been something that's been reviewed by Planning Commission
Yes.
at Planning Commission meetings. It's been,
Where's a,
and it's coming to us with a proposal to approve it. So I would ask why we couldn't vote on this if this is something that's been publicly discussed at both Planning Commission meetings, joint work meetings, and now is coming to us with the recommendation to approve it.
I'll step in and say why we may not want to. A big part of the reason that a big part of the public's notification is the city council. A lot of people come to us and rely on us to alert them to certain instances, or when they have questions, they come to their neighbor or whoever they, the people that are around you come to you. The people that are around Eileen, they don't come to me. They come to her. And every, all around. So the reality is, if we don't have the time or knowing when it's coming, we don't have the opportunity to talk to others.
So this
Well,
is
can I-
not something that's new, though. We've had two very distinct work meetings about this.
I know, but there's a lot of things that are way on the horizon. We don't necessarily try to address those a year in advance either.
Do you have
we
a
try
concern
to
with
address
it?
those? Not me personally, not a big concern. no. but-
I might suggest that we do table this. I'm looking at the past planning commission meetings, and I don't see the annexation appearing in our planning commission.
Annexation,
Does it not need to go through them?
the,
I mean, we've talked about it as part of the plat but I don't see it as being a discussion item on the planning commission meetings for the last 2 months. Should we have talked
it's
about
my
it?
understanding that the annexation comes to the city council and not the planning
Oh,
commission.
okay. Well, I thought
That's
you
my fault.
mentioned that. I just wanted to bring that up, that I don't see it. So that would be why. Fine.
And it's fine. It's fine. This exact document will be in your folder for the next meeting tonight.
So I have a direct question then. So what's the concern?
I don't know that there is a concern.
Okay.
That sometimes you'd like more than an hour to consider something.
Okay.
To
And,
feel,
and I'm not
to feel comfortable with it.
I'm not against that. The agenda was posted on Friday. And it's not a new item on the agenda. It's something that we've been discussing since last September when we first started holding our work meetings.
It's fine, Mayor. We can post it on the next agenda.
Or we could see how we do voting wise. I submit that
Make a motion.
I make a motion that we vote and see how it goes.
So you would need to make a motion either for or against it.
I make a motion that we vote for accepting this. Oh, what?
We approve.
You have to make a motion to do it,
To approve it.
not
To approve.
decide if we're going to do it.
Okay, somebody else do it.
You can do it, Flo.
Okay,
You can
give
do
me
it.
the right words.
I make a motion.
I make a motion to
Approve.
the annexation of the 12 acres into the corporate boundaries of Fruit Heights City.
Thank you, Flo. So I have a motion on the table from Flo. Do I have a second?
I second that.
I have a second from George. Do we have any further discussion about this? So all in favor of approving the annexation of 12.623 acres acres into the corporate boundaries of Fruit Heights City, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
I'm going to say nay, just because I would like the time to look at things. I, along with Gary, was at work until shortly before I came here tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just abstaining to vote because, quite
Okay.
frankly, I'm not against it. I would just like a little more time to consider it. I'm not necessarily against it though.
Okay, so we have 3 ayes and 2 nays. The motion passes. Item number 7, review and approve the minutes from the previous meeting, February 15th.
Did you get those?
Thank you. Those were available a long time ago. Thank you.
That does help. Thanks.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion from Gary. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second. Was it Eileen? All in favor of approving the minutes from February 15th, 2022, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
Thank you, Amy.
The motion carries. Sorry, that date is totally wrong. I'm sorry about that. We don't have an upcoming city council meeting today. We have an upcoming city council member meeting on the 15th, March 15th. City council reports. Holy cow.
Wow.
That's you.
Thank you.
George, do you have
Nothing.
anything?
Nothing this week.
Diane,
I do not have anything.
Gary,
Don't have anything.
Eileen.
I have 3 things I want to briefly discuss.
Okay.
Number 1.
Can you talk in your
is-
microphone, please?
Yes. We have budgeting things coming up. It's on. So we have budget things coming up quickly. And a couple things I would like us to consider as we're thinking about budgeting. And one of those is, it's a small item, but putting a cement pad up by the bike trail so we can put a honey bucket up there and use hopefully some Venmo money that we would hope to be getting from putting a sign up there for donations to support having a honey bucket up there to kind of relieve some of the neighborhood. So I would hope that would be something that we wouldn't have any problems with anybody spending that money that hopefully we will, I think if we put it there and then hope to get the money to pay it, pay along as we go, it'd be a great thing. And then another item that I think as things are getting busier up there on the bike trail, that might be beneficial is to see if there is one of the neighbors that lives close by there that would be willing to maybe get a discount on their garbage, meaning what we would do is provide them with maybe 2 garbage cans instead of 1 garbage can, and they would have one that they could pull in and out for themselves and another one that they would be willing to leave out for the neighborhood to potentially use, but still have ownership of it. And so if we give them their garbage for free, maybe they would be willing to have a garbage can sitting on their curb not for people to feel like they can offload their water heater into, but okay, there's a garbage can sitting here. I'd like to throw in my McDonald's wrapper.
Sure.
To try and clean up the area.
I like that.
So just
That's a good idea.
a thought, if there would be one of the neighbors up there that would be willing to let us do that, to give them a little discount on their bill. I don't know if there's any opposition to that.
I think that's a great idea, Eileen.
And then the other thing that I think is the big unsaid thing is we're at a point where we need to be deciding what we're going to do with our fire department. And either we've got to put up or shut up pretty quick, or
Can I just make just a quick comment that
yes,
there are conversations going on.
okay,
They haven't really been made public, but there are some things going on that are making, I can talk to you offline,
okay,
and I can talk to everyone individually offline, but there's just some things that are complicating the whole situation right now.
But does that mean we're going to make progress, do you think? Okay.
We got to talk about that offline.
Yeah.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
so thank you.
Yep.
That's-
Thank you, Eileen. Flo, do you have anything?
Just the radios we're getting, so that hopefully in time for the
Great shakeout.
CCC to use for the shakeout. And also Julia Bush has done a lot about Get Healthy Utah. And so she wants to turn that over to me unless somebody else wants to take it.
So Brandon actually submitted the application
good.
this week, and we got a reply back today that the application was accepted, and that we will have to wait for their board to approve it.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, that's
to
going
know.
well. And I would encourage you with that, please sign up and register for the Great Utah Shakeout, be a part of it, be as a community member.
What day is it going to be?
April 14th or something like that.
17th or something, yeah.
Yeah, I, s-
20th,
I signed up. I didn't remember the date.
Is the Thursday?
yeah.
That's the 14th.
Actually, I think it's the next week though. Well, we'll see.
Yes.
Because
It's a
Earth
ways.
Day is the
It's in April.
22nd. Oh, okay.
Ted left. I was going to give him a chance to say something. Darren, do you have anything? Brandon, do you have anything? No. Haley, do you have anything? Thank you for your help with the YouTube. I've got a couple compliments for it, and it's worked out very well. Thank you very much.
I can do it. So,
Brandon, do you have anything? No. That concludes our agenda, and I would
Motion
entertain
to
a motion
adjourn.
to adjourn. I have a motion from Gary Anderson,
I'll second it.
second from Flo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? We will adjourn at 8:30. Thank you.